everyone. Thank you so much for coming and welcome. My name is Emily Sexton. I'm the Wheeler Centre's Head of Programming, and together with Melbourne Festival, it's really terrific to have you here on a very sunny, warm Melbourne Sunday. I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and any elders who might be with us today. So this is a discussion titled The Art of Discomfort, and today we're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of things that potentially make us very uncomfortable and sort of explore why that is, and probably come out the other side realising that there's a whole other sort of realm of other things that really are much more uncomfortable. So I'm hoping that we're going to all learn something and also discover new ground. I'm joined today by Jess Tom, Scott Price and D.A. Calf, David, who have each got shows as part of this terrific 2016 Melbourne Festival. Today we are going to have what's known as a relaxed discussion or relaxed performance, and I'm going to throw to Jess to explain what that really is. What is that, Jess?
So, Biscuit, relaxed performances. Biscuit is a way of describing events or performances that take a relaxed approach to sound and movement coming from the audience or on stage. Biscuit, and invite everybody to relax and respond naturally, to go in and out if they need to. Biscuit, to adjust their environment to meet their needs. Biscuit, to that end, Biscuit, I've got Tourette syndrome. Biscuit, you're going to hear the word biscuit and hedgehog a lot. Biscuit, several times a day, my tics intensify to a point where I completely lose control of my body and speech. Biscuit, this looks seizure-like and needs similar management. Biscuit, if it happens, it looks quite dramatic, but don't worry, it's normal for me. My support worker will come and help me, and I'll come back and join you as soon as I can. Biscuit, I think the other thing to say, Biscuit, certainly from a Tourette's perspective, is Biscuit, sometimes my tics can be funny, and it's absolutely okay to laugh. Biscuit, hedgehog, cats.
Cool. We'll be here for about an hour, and I'm going to talk to the guys for about 40 minutes, and then we'll be opening it out to your questions. So I hope that you have plenty of them. But to kick us off, I thought the nature of what we're talking about, uncomfortable art and, I guess, uncomfortable subject matter and the way that art interacts with that, it's all incredibly subjective. To start, I wanted to know for each of you an uncomfortable experience that you have had in the theatre and how you've used that in your making of work. David, do you want to start?
Give me a minute to think.
Oh, okay. All right. Jess, do you want to start?
Biscuit, I'll start. Biscuit, because it was an uncomfortable experience at the theatre, Biscuit, that led me to the stage. Biscuit, and the only seat in the house I felt that I wouldn't be asked to leave. Biscuit. So in 2011, I went to see a show called Extreme Rambling, Biscuit, at a theatre in London by an amazing comedian and performer called Mark Thomas. Biscuit, and I'd prepared for that trip, and I'd done everything I thought I could. I'd met Mark beforehand. Spoken to the theatre, and he'd introduced me to the whole audience and explained that I had Tourette's and would therefore be making noise. But despite all that preparation, I was still asked at the interval to move to a sound booth at the side of the stage because people were complaining about the noises I was making. And it was a deeply humiliating and upsetting experience, and it made me think that theatre wasn't a space for me, It wasn't a space for my body or my mind or my brain, It wasn't a place where I could feel safe. And that's not about being creatively safe, that's about my identity and my who I am, not being safe to be in that space. And so as I sobbed in the sound booth, I promised myself that I would never set foot in another theatre again. It wasn't a promise I kept. And instead I was supported by friends and by creative organisations to make a show, that talks about Tourette's, that talks about those experiences at the theatre and more positive ones, and our belief that if you make work accessible, then you make it better, you make it better art. Cats.
Scott, what do you think?
I guess derogative language, people around, the exploitation and and your exploitation around people with disabilities and just portrayal. So I mean, can't say that word. So portraying people with disabilities on stage. I guess that makes me a bit uncomfortable, and just the way how people with disabilities are portrayed on stage.
Can you give me an example of a time you saw that?
I'm not sure if there's one. I can't seem to. I think on top of my head. I think just basically just some derogative language, around like ableist slurs, such as like B-word, spastic, stuff like that.
Spastic.
Sorry, excuse my ableist language, but yeah, just like ableist slurs and just derogative language basically.
And is that the kind of discussion of that kind of, I guess, language or the way that you've seen that stuff happen? Is that what drives a lot of Back-to-Back's creative work?
Yeah, I guess so, Emily. Yeah, look, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sort of based like the best expert to discuss about this. I was discussing about this with you, Emily, earlier. I think like when we were up in the green room, but yeah, I think it does basically, in fact, drive a lot of our work in theatre and in arts in regards to actors with disabilities, and I think that's like a beautiful, wondrous thing.
Yeah. David, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say two moments come to mind, and they're both linked by a common thread of nudity, although that is not the source of the discomfort. And one would be My Life in the Nude by Maud Davey, and the other would be The Naked Self at this year's Fowler. And both of them had an element of crowd participation. There was, in Maud's show, there's a point at which she invites someone to come up and read some of the lines, and before I realised what I'd done, I had volunteered to be that person. And I think sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. Naked Self, however, involves the crowd, or the audience rather, the onlooker, but in a very solitary way. And I think both of those experiences have informed how the Gorilla Museum addresses crowd participation when applicable in our works, and what makes an audience member uncomfortable or comfortable, and how to elicit the best experience in our work from an audience member. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you made a work as part of last year's Monofoma? This year's Monofoma, where that involved a hearse. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it involved I had three hearses. I was very lucky.
Why have one?
Why have one? Why not have $1 million worth of hearses?
Yeah.
That work, it was called Last Words in a Hearse, and it involved plucking people out of a wider audience, about 1,000 people, and unbeknownst to them, they were taken to the other end of the site and invited to enter into a hearse in which they put headphones on, and they were played a meditation on death, and it invited them to think about what their last words would perhaps be.
So why death? I mean, why? Like the subject about death. I mean, that's pretty provocative in terms, I think, of the art context. Like, why did you choose a subject like death?
I'm glad you asked. When the Gorilla Museum, when we were conceiving our first work, Funeral, which is at this year's Melbourne Festival, there was a lot of death around us. I'd lost 2 grandparents in the year and a half preceding that. Our debut season actually happened on the 1-month anniversary of my father's death. There was death in my partner's friendship group as well, all leading up to that, and it was certainly something in our lives. Definitely in our lives, and we felt that the best way to react to that and to, I guess, digest it and debrief and come to grips as much as you can with it was to express ourselves artistically. Yeah.
When people are challenged by each of your works, how do you sort of navigate your own response? Scott, I'm thinking of when you first premiered Ganesh versus the Third Reich, and there were protesters outside the Malthouse Theatre. How does that make you feel?
I don't best have a particular answer for that again, would you believe? you know, I mean, if people, okay, like, you know, if they're sort of like, like protesting outside, I think it was a peaceful protest. So if they're sort of like protesting outside, say like the Malthouse Theatre, we just say to them, okay, like, well, and for example, Ali or someone like that, we'll just say, okay, well, we'll come see our show, see what it's like, and just make a bit of a judgment about that. So we just give them tickets just to anyone who's protesting.
That's a good way. So you actually invite them in so that they know what they're talking about in a real way, rather than just being sort of responding to what they've heard.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, you know, I think there's a couple of articles on, I think it was like, was it the US or some white, I can't see the base finger at the time, it was a bit of a while ago, but yeah, I think there was, I think, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I think my boss, Blue Space, received a couple of death threat letters, would you believe, which said, okay, well, can you please not put on this type of performance time again, because it is offensive to Hindus and you know, and Muslims and stuff like that, and it's offensive to our God, and can you not put on this performance? And
how did the ensemble react to that feeling that you were maybe upsetting other people with the show?
I don't know. I mean, pretty insensitive, to tell you the truth. I mean, yeah, this is serious because I think a couple of ensemble members think, okay, like, well, you know, like, let's just also like support this sort of like program or content, and they were just so insensitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jess, you use comedy as a vehicle to sort of invite people into Biscuitland, into your world. Has it always had the sort of impact that you imagined?
Biscuit. I think that Biscuit humour and laughter is a really powerful tool for connecting people together, Biscuit, and getting people to think about and engage with things that they might find difficult or they might not have thought about before, Biscuit. And so we use humour because I think it's one of the best tools we have to do that, Biscuit. For me, it's all about where the laugh sits, where it's located, and who's controlling it, Biscuit. And we're very mindful of that with Biscuitland. Biscuit, is interesting thinking about our show in relation to discomfort, Biscuit, because as a relaxed performance and as a piece of work, we've given a lot of thought into how to create a space where as many people as possible can feel comfortable and included, Biscuit, and where, Biscuit, I think some of that comes out of the feeling and the lived experience, Biscuit, of discomfort, of not feeling like you have a place in a creative space.
So has anyone like mocked like your disability in arts, or have you seen anyone like mock your disability, or
Biscuit, Hedgehog, Biscuit? Yeah, I think I've experienced laughter in many different forms, Biscuit, and I used to be very frightened of it. And I think I used to be frightened of other people's laughter. I think fear created a lot of barriers in my life. I was frightened of people's judgments of me. I could see that people were often frightened of me. Was I dangerous or about to do, Biscuit, or drunk, Biscuit? And I think I used laughter to try and break down some of those barriers that fear creates. I think there's a big difference between laughing at something and laughing with something, and shared laughter is what I'm interested in. Laughter that is something that a group of people can enjoy and participate in together. Biscuit.
So what barriers did you face, or was that a personal question, or?
Biscuit, the barriers were about me restricting my life in response to my fears of how the world would treat me, Biscuit. And so Biscuit, with theatre, it was like, oh, Biscuit, that isn't a space where I feel safe, so I'll never go there again, Biscuit. And it's like, that's easy to create those barriers in your mind. But I also think that creative spaces and cultural spaces have lots of invisible barriers, Biscuit, that if you don't experience difference or have lived experience of a particular disability or condition or other characteristic, Biscuit, that that they wouldn't know that those barriers are there. I think lots of people wouldn't have thought that the rules that we impose on our creative spaces and cultural spaces, like the need to be quiet or still, would be limiting a whole group of people who then think, well, that's not a space I can be in. Biscuit, we don't just work in performance, we do lots of work with museums and galleries through Tourette's Hero, Biscuit, and we held a big creative takeover event of Tate Britain in London, which is a very traditional gallery full of paintings, Biscuit, and we invited children and young people, 300 children and young people with Tourette's from across the UK into that space, to transform it, to take it over, to work with artists. But lots of families, when asked, said, we don't go to museums and galleries, we only go to spaces we perceive as noisy. And it's like that misses out so many opportunities. But those barriers are often invisible, and I think, Biscuit, in my work, I'm interested in finding them and pointing them out. Biscuit, hedgehog, Biscuit, hey, I love cats. Biscuit,
I did too.
Biscuit, that line between Biscuit, whether someone's laughing at you or laughing with you at something, is often characterised as a blurred line, Biscuit, but I don't think I've ever experienced it in that way. I can't think of a single occasion where I haven't been completely sure if someone's laughing at me or enjoying the humour of a situation with me, Biscuit. So I think we can't let our fear of mockery or trivialising something put us off using tools like laughter that have great power. Biscuit. Cats. Biscuit.
I heard you talk on the Conversation Hour
Biscuit.
the other day with Raph Epstein about how your next show with Battersea Arts Centre isn't so much in the comedy kind of realm.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
Right. How's that going to, can you tell us a bit about the development of that work? I think comedians, or certainly all over Melbourne, all over the world, it's such a great tool for, making people comfortable. Back-to-backs work, for example, doesn't... Well, you do use comedy, but, it is often quite serious and epic in tone. What's that going to feel like, that next stage?
Biscuit. Well, I didn't want to say it on radio, Biscuit, but the next project that we're looking to work on is a neurodiverse presentation of Samuel Beckett's play Not I, Biscuit, which for anybody who doesn't know it is a disembodied mouth in a very dark room. Biscuit, it's a female voice, neurodiverse voice, with neurodiverse meaning, Biscuit, someone whose brain works in a different way, or it's a way of understanding that all our brains work differently, and some people have particular conditions that mean that they are neurodiverse. And Mouth, Biscuit, gives this really intense monologue, fast monologue for sort of 10 to 15 minutes, and it's about not recognising your own voice, and it's in a dark space. Biscuit, it's a very intense and serious piece of establishment theatre, and we're looking at performing it. And Biscuit, part of the reason that we're interested in that piece is because, as far as we're aware, that's never been played by a disabled performer, Biscuit, because when we've been touring backstage in Biscuitland, we've come across a lot of venues who've said, we're really interested in relaxed performance, but we haven't had the right type of work yet. We haven't had the right show. And I'm really interested in this idea that there's some sort of cultural curation that happens around what work can be made accessible to disabled people and what can't. And so we're interested in making a really challenging piece of theatre accessible at every level, Biscuit, but without reducing the intensity of that experience, and using it as a catalyst, Biscuit, to talk about voice and representation, who has permission to be on what stages, and also that experience of recognising yourself or your own perspective. Cats, Biscuit.
For each of you, you are at that sort of pushing frontier of what is acceptable or what people normally see at the theatre or even just more broadly in society. What's that like, David, when you are sort of pushing the boundaries of what audiences do or the kinds of subject matter that we explore?
What's it like for us or the audience or both?
Or both, yeah.
Well, for us, I don't think we'd have it any other way. We don't want to create anything particularly orthodox. I guess to extrapolate wider than just the audience, I think, speaking of death, which is obviously the topic that we often traverse, I feel that everyone has experienced it, or most people have experienced it to some extent and in some level of remove. And most people want to talk about it, but they never feel like they have an invitation to discuss it. For instance, I mean, the Uber driver that we had on the way here, like after he'd finished telling us about the fact that he just took his previous ride was with the guy that founded Drawing Dicks on the Herald Sun, we got into talking about our show and death, and he straight away started telling us stories from his life about death. Now, that wouldn't have happened if we didn't give him the invitation to do that in that context. And I feel like the vast majority of people are like that fellow, and they want to talk about it, they want to work out how to digest their own experience of death in their lives, because it's ultimately not understandable. We can't, anyone that's lost someone close to them, you can never comprehend how that person no longer exists. It's just illogical. It's almost absurd. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the better we feel about it in a way, even if it's quite difficult. So I think that we really like that we allow our audience members and our cast members and the people that we work with the opportunity to discuss, to ruminate, to converse on that topic, which is very important.
Yeah, I asked the same question for you, Scott. You know, back-to-back sort of the theatre that you make is, you know, some of the most internationally renowned theatre from coming out of Australia, and you are in that kind of real kind of precise edge of contemporary performance. Do you think about those kinds of ideas, or you just think about your own acting and kind of performance within the ensemble?
I think our theatre work, pardon me again, is very quite unorthodox in the way I think it's presented and how theatre sits outside of the norm. So I think most notable case there was actually it was small metal objects, where I wasn't basically in it at the time, but it was based off, it was set like in an outdoor theatre proscenium. And so obviously 2 actors, or it was actually 4 more, like, because we had I think 2 guest actors at the time, but they basically had like radio mics, and so they were sort of like mic'd, and yeah, so I think the audience, like yourselves, would hear what like the 4 actors were saying at the time in the performance.
Yeah. And that was a work that kind of, I guess, you know, when I saw it, it was at Flinders Street Station, mid-renovation almost. And so we were sort of sitting in the middle of the train station watching, all of these kinds of, commuters coming through, and then you could sort of pick out the performers as part of it through your headphones. It was a very clear example of, I guess, back-to-back being ahead of a lot of trends for site-specific work, for, things happening in public spaces. Do you think that, that if you're a sort of provocative company in that way, does it get tiring? Does it get kind of, I don't know, it means that you're constantly having to sort of explain yourselves, or not really?
Yeah, we're trying to basically, create like like new content to try and keep it a bit fresh, and I like to basically try and keep myself and my content a bit fresh and new. So in terms, I think, of innovation, I think we're trying to basically, grow that over time.
Just, do you find that having to explain everything all the time and educate, basically, even from the, I when we walked in here today, I was like, thinking that I would sort of say to you, hey, let's talk about, relaxed performance. You were so ahead of me, because this is part of your life. It's constantly explaining yourself in the world. Is that boring at times? Is that tiresome?
I don't think it gets boring. I think it can get tiring. It doesn't get tiresome. Biscuit, it's a tool for living. I think for me, sure. Biscuit, having the language and confidence to explain my experiences, talk about my perspective and say what I need has means that I can have a good quality of life, I can be more independent, and I can make sure that my support needs are met and that people respond in a way that means that I don't feel excluded. So it's protective in some ways. Biscuit, yes, of course it gets tiring. I am really excited by ways to mean that doesn't happen. Biscuit, there's certainly, I'm looking at just starting work with a venue in the UK called Battersea Arts Centre on the idea of a relaxed venue, which would aim to make all its shows relaxed performances, and to have a methodology where equality of experience was at the heart of everything that was happening. What excites me about that is the idea of not having to explain. Being able to look at anything in a programme and know that you'd be welcome and not have to do all the work that I sometimes have to do to make sure that it's physically accessible, that the rules are going to be such that, and the performers are going to be informed so that I don't feel excluded or I don't feel at risk in that space, personally at risk. And I'm Biscuit, I'm obviously travelling all over the world, talking about theatre, seeing theatre. Biscuit, my confidence in seeing live performance is still really fragile, and I'm aware. I've been aware of that. I went to a comedy festival in Wales at the start of this year, where I didn't do some of those things, and actually had a really upsetting time as a result. And I think, Biscuit, that's the thing that I want to change, is that we as a society consider difference more in how we set things up. That's the change that needs to happen. In the meantime, I will, of course, continue to explain what I need and advocate for myself and make sure that I'm giving people opportunities to be supportive. But equally, I want to live in a society that creates less disabling spaces and less disabling environments and structures. And part of that is really simply giving thought, Biscuit, to the fact that people do things differently. Biscuit.
I mean, it's interesting because you are completely occupying an
Biscuit.
activist role in that sense. David, you were sort of talking before in the way that you, and as an artist, occupy a sort of a counsellor or a psychotherapist or a kind of, at least a sort of counterpart friend role in some really difficult subject matter. What is it when artists move into these other kinds of capacities? Or do you think that when it comes to those edgier subject matters, artists have always done that? Sort of, put forward a creative solution which necessitates them to take up other kinds of roles. Well.
I think the arts are probably the field most conducive to entering into that realm, and the arts can move quickly and be flexible. But we sometimes do it in a slightly ad hoc way, which means we have to learn skills as we go.
Ad hoc.
Sorry?
Ad hoc.
Ad hoc, yeah. Like, just make it up as we go, which is not always the most professional and applicable way. So sometimes you're sort of chasing your tail a little bit, I think. And yeah, you do move into other realms where you probably need to pick up some new skills. With the Last Words in a Hearse project, after people were let in and they heard the meditation, they were actually invited to say their last words. And I know for me, going through, and that was recorded on audio, and so for me at least, going through all of that, I procrastinated about it a lot because I find that really daunting. But I mean, certainly I feel like after doing that, I need counselling, if not them. And certainly with our work here at Melbourne Festival, we have a process at the end of the season where we essentially have an in-house counselling session run by ourselves, who are not trained counsellors, but we do pretty well.
It's a comprehensive debrief on everything that you've done.
Yeah. Not a debrief as in that lighting cue was a little bit late. It's a counselling session.
I am interested in that because I think when artists are putting themselves into these vulnerable kinds of positions, we do need to kind of make sure that there's appropriate structures for you. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about how the ensemble is supported to make your best work at Back to Back?
In terms of what, like...
How you work with different other members of the company in terms of carers, how are all your different needs kind of supported by the company?
Sorry. So there's a national system, again called the NDIS, and so that's like a assurance sort of programs here for people. I think you want to set up goals and support needs for people with disabilities, and so I basically obviously went for it. And would you believe I basically had a bit of a bad experience because of questions asked about my school life, and I think that's probably what made me very uncomfortable, and so I was actually basically in tears and had to leave. Also, I think the meeting halfway, and so I probably didn't actually have to get my input out of it. They didn't obviously get much out of me because of what happened, but so I think say okay, like, well, if there's like a like a pathway, I think, for theatre and arts, I think the person with disability can pursue that, and there's also like other sort of like avenues, I think, for support needs. So such as I think it's like it is like employment, sort of like goals, like personal goals and other stuff like that.
But I'm interested in like what Ali Harvey, for example, does with you, or maybe Kate Sullan, or different people who work at Back to Back, how they kind of what they do to kind of help you guys. You guys have a huge touring schedule. I've seen you in Montreal. You've been almost everywhere with the company.
Look,
what do they do to help you get there?
Yeah, look, again, I think the guys there, they just just look after us and just help us around. I think just to get around everywhere in the space, they take us to a few different art museums and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to come up to your questions shortly. But I did also want to ask for each of you, this is sort of, I guess, the opposite, and I guess particularly for you and Scott and Jess. I mentioned Montreal before. Scott, after seeing Ganesh versus the Third Reich as part of Festival Trans Amérique when we were both there, I saw people literally rush up to the company when we were sitting in a cafe having lunch. They recognise you on the street. They tell you all sorts of different stories. And Jess, after the show the other day, people literally swarmed the stage to kind of talk to you. How does it feel to have those kinds of super fans? Is it uncomfortable, or is it
really
kind of
good? Really great. People just come up to you and say, like, my restoration's well done, and it's just a beautiful, wondrous thing, would you believe?
Is it ever strange to have people just approach you in the street? It's just good.
It's actually not. It's just.
I once had someone who showed me a tattoo of the word biscuit that they'd had done on their body, biscuit, which was very flattering but a bit weird.
Really?
Biscuit. But I think for me, it's an issue of representation, biscuit, because I think it's really important to see difference represented on stage. Because if you see people who perhaps reflect your experience or perspective, or people who move or sound like you do, biscuit, then you're much more likely to think that is a space that you can occupy, or a career that you can pursue, or biscuit, and a place you should be. And then we'll have more interesting stories and work as a result. Because otherwise, biscuit, there are lots of barriers that particularly face disabled people, but lots of other groups in accessing stage and making work. And it potentially is a creative risk. It means that we risk having really dull work, or work that isn't representative of our communities and society. And
More people with disabilities in the arts, I say.
Yeah, visibility is important, and it's important because it not just for people who are on stage because of their careers, but also catalysing change and opportunity for other people too. Biscuit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested too in, like that they're sort of these fans are both like, they might be people with disabilities or not, and there's actually benefits across
Biscuit.
any kind of individual in seeing that difference.
Biscuit, I often think the people who most need to think about and talk about disability are currently non-disabled people. Biscuit, because disability is something that can affect anyone at any point in their life.
Autism pride.
having thoughtfully considered what that might mean can make a big difference to how you adapt to changing circumstances or bodies or brains. Biscuit.
And our bodies are changing constantly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not a niche issue. And the narratives that we're often presented around disability are so rigid and tragic and thin and not reflective, really, generally, of the lives that disabled people live. And I think it's important to start telling those stories in really interesting and creative ways. Biscuit, cats.
Jess, Scott, you just said autism pride. Jess, you call yourself Tourette's hero. There's a real reclaiming, I guess, of language in that sense.
Patrick.
What is Tourette's hero? That's a much broader company than just this work. Is that right?
Yeah, Biscuit. Biscuit. I co-founded Tourette's Hero in 2010 as a creative response to my experiences living with the condition, Biscuit, and in response to a gap in what there was for me as I was adjusting to changing tics and changing circumstances. And I'd lots of there was traditional, more sort of charitable support, but that didn't fit with what I needed or what I wanted to talk about. Much like the invitation that David mentioned, it's like I felt like I wanted to talk about the humour and the funny experiences that I have, as well as the challenges, and that wasn't something that I was getting from anywhere. So we decided to create something. And Tourette's Hero shares and celebrates the humour and creativity of Tourette's and campaigns for a more inclusive society and for social justice. Biscuit. But we do that in a really broad range. So making theatre is part of it, but also working with visual arts organisations, Biscuit, putting on creative events for children and young people, because I think that, Biscuit, positive memories can be protective, and if we can encourage particularly disabled children and young people to have high expectations and high confidence, then that will lead to more inclusive spaces. Biscuit. Cats.
So both of you, Scott and Jess, have talked a lot about visibility. David, a lot of your work sort of, exists under this sort of anonymity and kind of, pseudonyms, and you're sort of finding freedom in kind of, I guess, removing identity. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you've sort of played with it to sort of approach those more provocative issues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely sure that the two are linked. Okay. I don't think that we feel that to address the topic of death we need to do it in an underground fashion. I just feel, for various reasons, some of which I sort of can't go into, our company's decided to be a little clandestine, but we'll. I mean, for instance, the last words in a hearse thing, that was not so. That was quite open, except for the fact that people didn't actually know what they were going to when they were plucked out of the audience. But it was not a standalone ticketed event, for instance. It was just sort of attached onto a wider event. I guess anonymity allows us to shapeshift a little bit more. And I mean, as a company, we're quite young. We're only 2.5 years old, and we're part-time as well. Like the two of us who are the company, theatre is not making theatre is. We don't have a history of making theatre, and prior to this, and it's not our main gig, but we love doing it. And so I guess.
So why theatre then? Why did you choose this sort of mechanism, that sense of being live and sort of, I guess, being with other people in space? What about that was appealing for the kinds of things you wanted to say?
Yeah, I use the term theatre a little loosely as well. Like we're still working on how to actually describe what we do. Is it live art? Is it immersive, interactive performance? Is it theatre? It happens in a theatre context often. I think the thing about whatever that realm is, that locus of descriptions, is that it involves as many modalities, interaction with as many modalities as we can. So my partner in crime is a writer of words on the page, and I come from a sound art music installation background. We can combine those things, then we can bring in more sort of elements of trickery and stuff. So it's
cool.
it's sort of like it's the 3 or 4D version of where we come from. Yeah.
Cool. I might open out on that note to you guys. Do you have questions for our panel on the nature of provocation and uncomfortable art, and what it is that we that we can kind of use theatre and kind of music and writing and art for, and kind of exploring more challenging topics?
Yeah, one over there.
Oh, we might wait for the microphone. If
Yeah,
that's okay.
just wait.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing.
Is it more important to you for what you do, or equally as important for us watching you and enjoying you?
I guess so. Yeah, just
Which
for
one?
you. Well, I mean, just for the audience, just enjoy our work and just to respect it, and and we love for you guys here to come see our shows.
It's more important that the audience enjoys it, or that you do?
No, the audience,
Biscuit. I think that's probably the same for a non-disabled performer. It's like, Biscuit, it's important that you're motivated to be doing what you're doing, and that you believe in the show that you've created or the work that you're making. But I want audiences to feel something from that. I want them to take stuff away from that, and I want it to be relevant to the community and society that I live in. And that's so they feel like they go hand in hand for me, and I don't think one is more important than the other, because I think they feed into each other. Biscuit. Cats.
Yeah, I think that if our initial motivation is to both please an audience, or to give something to an audience, and to give something to ourselves, express something, and I think we're quite generous, but if it came down to a show where we thought it ran really well but the audience didn't get much from it, or a show where the audience got a lot from it but we thought there were some difficulties, it would be the former. Oh, sorry, pleasing the audience would be the priority. Yeah.
Next question.
I had one on the subject of death. In your, sorry, I'm not used to talking to a microphone. In your hearse thing that you did on the last words, do you know if any of the people that you took from the audience believed in the afterlife or had religious thoughts about what happens after death, and did that relate in the work that you did as well? How do you approach that?
I actually can't say that I know that any of them did have any beliefs either way. I personally didn't have any interaction with them. At no point did they see me, or there's been no sort of. There's a sort of a follow-up email thing that happens with them, but most people decided to remain anonymous. And there was no point at which it was suggested that they note one way or another what their beliefs were. So I sort of, it sort of never came up.
But did the sort of the contemplation of the responsibility you might have in, if someone was of a certain kind of spiritual or religious belief, did you consider that when making the work?
Probably not enough. It was very important, and with the wider works that we make, that because it's quite specific the way we draw audience members in and invite them into the show at any point, like it has to remain a safe space at any point before, leading up to the work, during the work, and after the work. They're free to leave. They're free to get whatever they need from us to feel that they're cared for and that they're not taken advantage of at all. And certainly there was a component of that Last Words in the Hearse show where they had the possibility post-recording to say, I want that destroyed. So they were left with specific contact details and a list of directions as to how the work would be used in the future, how those recordings would be used, and if any point they felt uncomfortable about that, they could have it pulled and destroyed.
Sure.
No, interestingly, no one's taken me up on that offer.
That's good. Next question.
Yeah, just one up there. Just near the back.
This is a bit of a follow-on from the first question that was asked about whether or not you create work for yourself or for the audiences to enjoy. I think when it comes to stories about people who have various disabilities or from different, approaches to everything or whatever it is that you want to describe it, part of that there is, engaging with stories that are unfamiliar. And a lot of the time, the stories that people like is something that is familiar because that's, part of the way in which we function as individuals. We engage with things that are familiar. And so when it comes to that line between creating work for yourself and creating work for audiences, how much of it do you take into consideration when you think do you think about creating works that people will enjoy, but they're also about yourselves and creating something that I'm not wording this very well, so apologies. But making people enjoy something that isn't familiar to them, which isn't standard to what they actually enjoy. How much do you think about crossing that threshold and making people like something that they're unfamiliar with and therefore engaging with new forms of narrative?
Biscuit, I think certainly when we're making work, we expect to be making work for a disabled and non-disabled audience. We expect there to be a mix of people in our audience. Biscuit, what I really enjoy is that I can sometimes see that that the whole audience is laughing, but I can sometimes notice that a disabled audience member might laugh harder at particular jokes and be laughing in a slightly different location than a non-disabled audience member. And I think that's great to have within a piece of work, that people can pull out different stuff. But I think in terms of what's familiar or not, that familiarity is part of the issue. It's because disability affects lots of people, but it's not visible in our communities or on our media or on our stages in a representative way. And so that breeds an unfamiliarity. I think I'm interested in increasing in breaking down that discomfort, talking about things that just bodies work differently. Biscuit.
Yeah, I guess people are sort of basically quite scared of new and emerging and innovative artwork. So I think probably just I'll probably say don't be scared. I think to try new things just don't be scared. I think of new art and innovative art.
Biscuit. I think people are curious. Biscuit, I think people do want to know about different perspectives. Biscuit, I think it's quite natural to be curious.
Of course I do.
Biscuit, some of the best conversations I have are with children who are really open and ask incredible questions and importantly listen to the answers. And I think there's some point as we get older where we get more uncomfortable with difference or with asking or with not knowing or more fearful about doing the wrong thing. And that means that we have less probably interesting interactions with the world. So I think we can learn a lot from children's approach to difference, particularly. Biscuit. Cat.
Next question.
DA, you spoke earlier of some of the participants in the Hearst piece wanted their audio pulled a bit later on, and you gave them that option, I think.
Oh, they didn't take up the option. They didn't. But the option, it still is there.
You still had the option, right? Yeah. I was just very interested whether any of you have embarked on a sort of an artistic or a creative project, and as you've gotten deeper into it, you've found yourself in a place where you really can't go any further because it's too hurtful or painful. And have you thought that you have to abort mission to preserve your artistic integrity, or do you sort of modify it on the fly and water it down a bit and make it a bit more palatable, both for yourself as a creator and for the people who are experiencing it as audience members?
Well, all of the above. I feel like as a company, between the two of us, I try to push things a little bit. I'm happy to go further into the discomfort realm, and my partner not so. I think with some of the works in the past, because of the way they're written, changing them on the fly is not possible, and so it hasn't come up. But you'd probably have to more abort mission rather than just run it as you go. Something like Last Words in a Hearse is more. That was a little bit more flexible, I guess. But luckily, I didn't have to invoke that sort of clause, I guess. Yeah.
How about you, Scott? Because you work, like David, as part of a sort of a large ensemble, and each of you will have different boundaries about what you consider okay or what you consider not okay. How do you negotiate those within the group?
I'm not sure. I think one case, for example, I think it was based in food court, where obviously we did need some this improvisation. Again, where these two women actors at the time were trying basically bullying this third woman, and then one basically of the women actors told the third woman actor to basically to take her clothes off, and so she still basically did flippantly, and then we had to obviously protect her dignity, would you believe? And this is actually just going a while ago, and I think it was actually negotiated and added in play. So she was actually in fact
the scene,
so she was actually in fact fully nude in the scene. Another based case of the examples here, when one of the women actors told me to get fucked, Scott, and I was just so uptight and just so angry that she said that. And I think she didn't quite understand what was reality and what was not. And so I think that was also in the scene, in one of our scenes of Ganesh versus the third wife. Yeah.
So it's a constant discussion, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Biscuit.
Jess, do you call the shots completely in your work, or is there a negotiation between you and the director and your collaborators as well?
There's a negotiation between me, the people, my collaborator Jess Mabel-Jones in the piece, the director Matthew Poutney, and Tourette's. If anybody calls the shots in our show, it's definitely my tics, Biscuit. And I think that's, for us, creating a show where we knew I was neurologically incapable of staying on script, and that every show was going to be different, and having to create a space that had that flexibility was really interesting. It was a big creative challenge, but a big part of me feeling safe on stage is about the relationship I have with my collaborator Jess Mabel-Jones, who's an amazing performer and puppeteer and brings my world to life in really interesting ways, but also is about making me feel safe. Biscuit, Tourette's calls stuff out. I think there's no way that I could do something, Biscuit, if I didn't feel comfortable, because it just, it wouldn't work. My brain would say what the issue was straight away, which I think which is an interesting advantage.
So you let your Tourette's do the talking.
Biscuit, if there's a problem, it will do the talking. Biscuit, hedgehog.
Next question.
Cat.
So recently I've been seeing a lot of, maybe not a lot, but independent theatre where it's been a deaf-blind collaboration, or a show that was entirely in Auslan, or a one-man show who had cerebral palsy. And I'm seeing your show tonight, Jess. I feel like there's a growing number of independent theatre that's taking that chance to portray this, but yet main stage theatre, especially seeing their shows for next year, doesn't really include that. And what needs to happen for that to occur? Is it the people need to demand it, or the venues need to start considering it?
Biscuit. Casting directors need to recognise that just because a character isn't listed as disabled doesn't mean it can't be played by a disabled person. That would be a good starting point. I think Biscuit increased representation in stories that aren't directly relevant to disability having disabled characters, and also I think there needs to be an intolerance of non-disabled people playing disabled roles, because that often leads to stereotypes, portrayals, which are unhelpful. Biscuit.
Yeah, I agree. I think most of notably, for example, Wayman, which obviously it's just a bad, or it isn't so much like a bad portrayal of an older person with disability, or portraying like character with a disability. I think there are sort of like other avenues for people with disabilities to play other people, other characters with disabilities, and I think we should stop it. The stereotypes, and I think just have some sort of a diverse range of characters.
Biscuit.
Yeah.
I think audiences getting more demanding would be great, and an intolerance of experiences that aren't representative. So I think we need we need more non-disabled. We need more disabled writers. We need disabled people at all different in different creative industries, creating work that is reflective of disability culture. Biscuit. Hedgehog.
I'd also say that having worked in Melbourne's independent scene for 10 years, inevitably the main stage can't help but get there because that's where the cool stuff's happening, So, the independent scene is where the new ideas are explored, and eventually that main stage does catch up, because otherwise it's just a really dry well, to keep returning to that incredibly non-diverse and kind of boring existence. That's just my 2 cents. Do we have another next question?
Hedgehog.
This is mostly for Jess. I wondered what the process of you explaining what a relaxed performance is to Melbourne Festival was, and if you had any conversations with them about you wanting to be an audience member at the other shows in the festival.
Hedgehog. Biscuit. So, Biscuit, all our performances are relaxed. Every single one of Backstage in Biscuitland is a relaxed performance. Any venue or festival booking us, we make them aware of that. We send them. We've got information that we send out about relaxed performances that addresses lots of the frequently asked questions, and that we liaise quite closely with whoever's producing for the festival, and that's quite a straightforward and simple process for us as a company, because we've done it a lot. Biscuit, and we go over that with whenever we arrive in a venue, and with any new front of house team, we talk to them about what that process means and address anything within that space that needs to be addressing, which is sometimes we're not big fans of, don't do rule signs, like things like don't do this and don't do that. So we sometimes adjust our environment a little bit. Biscuit. And so far, every that's been embraced by every space that we've visited in really interesting ways. Biscuit. I know that there are some companies that we've worked with who are primarily non-disabled theatre companies who are interested in making their work accessible and holding relaxed performances, who perhaps have a tougher time convincing venues that's something that they should do, because I think if it's inherent in the work, places go with it. Actually, when other theatre companies are saying we want this to be a relaxed performance, that's not always greeted with the warmth and enthusiasm that I would hope. Biscuit. Cats.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Biscuit. I didn't address the going to see other work here. Biscuit. I literally haven't had time, Biscuit, because lots of the stuff when our show has clashed with lots of stuff. There was a really diverse programme, and I'd loved to have seen more work, and felt like I could have had that conversation. But for me, it still very much is a conversation. I wouldn't go and see a piece of work, even at a festival where I'm performing, without having had a conversation with the company or performer. Biscuit.
One last
question.
Yeah, hi, Jess. You mentioned the issue of your Tourette's doing the talking when you're not.
Biscuit. When
something's not right. And that just struck me as quite a sort of powerful source of creativity. And I wondered about...
Security breach, yeah. Yeah, it is also that has that potential too.
Do you engage with your tics in that way? Almost, it's a muse or something to
Biscuit, yeah, Tourette's is a collaborator within our process, and we often use Biscuit tics as a way to generate text, Biscuit, and then also like creatively use that or edit that or play with that. At the heart of Tourette Zero is the idea. Biscuit. So it started with a conversation I had with my co-founder Matthew Poutney. He said that describes my Tourette's as a crazy language generating machine, and told me that not doing something creative with it would be wasteful. And that sentence transformed how I thought about my life, and I was able to hear that in a way that I'd not heard anything else about Tourette's. And before that, I'd find it really hard to talk about and think about. So at the heart of Tourette Zero is the idea that that tics are there as a creative platform, and we share over 6,000 of them on the website, and they're there for other people to use as a springboard for their creativity, so to make art, poetry or images too. And so the idea that we take that spontaneity and use it as a starting point for ideas. Biscuit. Kat.
We've got one more question we might finish on.
Yeah, just quickly.
Patrick.
I'm profoundly deaf, and it's been interesting thinking about the whole idea of what is normal and what does normal mean. And it makes me question what normal means. So I'm just wondering, should we be assuming normality or talking about ourselves as normal?
No.
No way.
Biscuit. There's an amazing performer and comedian called Francesca Martinez, whose show was had a big impact on me, and it was called "What the Fuck is Normal?" And Biscuit. And in that, she says that normal is a setting on a washing machine. Biscuit. And I think it's not for humans. It's for washing machines.
Yeah.
Biscuit.
Well, on that note of washing machines and normality, thank you so much to our panel. Can you join me in giving a big round of applause?
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.